Indiana Humanities has been a champion for the humanities for more than 45 years. There's no better vehicle to bring people together than the humanities. They teach us optimism and empathy. They teach us how to consider facts and draw our own conclusions. They spark creativity, lead to personal enrichment, and a greater connection to place. Through our work at Indiana Humanities, we initiate, support, and highlight thought-provoking and impactful programs in all 92 counties around the state. We bring in interesting speakers. We experiment with different formats, provide grants and resources to other nonprofits, partner with unique organizations, and serve as a megaphone for humanities events, organizations, and news. Our mission is simple. We want to encourage Hoosiers to think, read, and talk. But our impact is extraordinary. More access to humanities-based programs leads to stronger communities and a stronger Indiana.
Hello, good evening. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's In Conversation with Aimee Nezhukumatathil. My name is Megan Telligman, and I'm Director of Programs at Indiana Humanities. Indiana Humanities is a statewide nonprofit that encourages Hoosiers to think, read, and talk. We work with libraries, museums, and other nonprofits to help provide fun and unique opportunities to engage with literature, ethics, history, world culture, and other humanities fields across the state of Indiana through our grants and programs. For the past 2 years, we have encouraged Hoosiers to discover and discuss their relationships with the natural world through our current initiative, Unearthed. We've been exploring through literature, film, and scholarship some really big questions. How do we shape our environment, and how does our environment shape us? How do our personal experiences with nature inspire us to create, engage, and act on behalf of nature? And finally, in thinking about the changes that we brought upon the more than human world, how do we understand humanity's legacy, and are we being good ancestors? That is why we are thrilled to have invited Aimee to Bloomington this evening. For the past year, more than 30 communities across the state have been participating in what we call One State, One Story, organizing more than 100 book discussions and programs about Aimee's remarkable collection of short essays exploring the natural world and all its wonders. Aimee's collection encourages us to look closely at the world that surrounds us, to see the beauty, complexity, community, and sometimes even danger that exists in the more than human world. Those communities of creatures have important things to teach us about our own lives and relationships. Aimee is the author of the New York Times bestselling illustrated collection of nature essays and Kirkus Prize finalist, World of Wonders, in praise of fireflies, whale sharks, and other astonishments, which was chosen as Barnes & Noble's Book of the Year. She has 4 previous poetry collections, Oceanic, Lucky Fish, At the Drive-In Volcano, and Miracle Fruit. The last 3 were published through Tupelo Press. Her most recent chapbook is Lace Pyrite, a collection of epistolary garden poems with the Indiana poet Ross Gay, also in attendance this evening. Her writing appears twice in the Best American Poetry series, the New York Times Magazine, ESPN, Plowshares, American Poetry Review, and Tin House. Honors include a poetry fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts, a Pushcart Prize, a Mississippi Arts Council grant, and being named a Guggenheim Fellow in Poetry. In 2021, she became the first ever poetry editor of Sierra Magazine, the storytelling arm of the Sierra Club. She is a professor of English and creative writing at the University of Mississippi's MFA program. This evening, we'll hear a reading from Aimee, and then we'll turn to our conversation where Bloomington's own Ross Gay will kick off the discussion. I encourage you to hold on to your questions. Indiana Humanities staff members will be around with microphones at the end for some audience Q&A. And one big thank you before we invite Aimee to the stage. This program was made possible with IU's Arts and Humanities Council, our wonderful host this evening in the Cook Center. We're thrilled to be in this beautiful hub for the humanities here at Maxwell Hall. And then finally, I just want to note one special thing that we just kicked off last week. It's a special time for Indiana Humanities because our organization turns 50 years old this year. So when we started in 1972, we were the state grant-making arm of the National Endowment for the Humanities. And since then, our work has grown to connect people, open minds, and enrich lives by creating and facilitating programs that encourage Hoosiers to think, read, and talk, as we often say, in all 92 counties in the state. We hope you'll join us this anniversary year as we reflect on our accomplishments and imagine what's possible in the next 50 years. As evidenced by our program this evening, we believe in the power of the humanities to help us grapple with our past, envision our future, and consider ourselves as individuals and members of communities in the present. We invite you to become part of this vision by supporting us at Indiana Humanities in this year. And this current campaign will provide a strong foundation for our statewide work as we tackle difficult questions, understand different perspectives, connect across divides, and provide context for this wild and beautiful world that we all share. So if you'd like to join in the effort, you can visit indianahumanities.org/donate, and we would thank you for your support. So thank you again to our wonderful partners here at the Cook Center and to all of you for being here this evening. Please join me in welcoming Aimee Nezhukumatathil.
Oh my goodness. Thank you all so much. I'm so happy to be in the state of Indiana. I just have so much gratitude for the entire Indiana Humanities Council I feel like I've been working with y'all for the past 2 years. And you have been the most kind, generous people and hardest working people for bringing my book to life, but also seeing how you've touched so many communities across the state of Indiana, and to emphasize the power and the magic that is reading. So thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with one of my dear friends, and I wanted to give a special shout out to students here in the audience, for everybody actually, for taking their time out on a Thursday evening, and it's that first day of fall, and it really does feel like fall for the first time. So I was kind of completely unprepared. When I left Mississippi, it was 95 degrees. And when I go back tomorrow, it'll be 96. So it's nice. I get like one burst of fall. We don't really get a fall there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a poem, and then I'm going to read from World of Wonders, and then kind of do a wrap up selection, kind of like it's the epilogue of my book, kind of. And then I will get to chat with Ross Gay, and then we'll wrap it up. Now, poetry is my first love. I have not abandoned poetry whatsoever. So I wanted to at least give one poem here, and this is kind of just an ode to friendship. This is my second favorite flower in the world. My first favorite flower is the corpse flower, which I write about in this book. The second one, if you don't know what this is your homework for tonight. It's a Baja fairy duster. A Baja fairy duster. So in case you don't know, you can Google it or something. When you are near, I turn into a Baja fairy duster. By which I mean I look like that flower that fireworks in mid-sentence in the sky over the end of a sweaty ball game. The crowd makes its way to their cars while popcorn spill and multicolored chocolate candies melt into concrete steps. Maybe I mean you make me want to live beachfront so I can taste the salt and cliff twist on each red stamen. When you're near, you call hummingbirds to my throat, and we throw our heads back and stomp our feet from laughing too loud in a cafe. I make good tears in my eyes, which means joy, and maybe emerald feathers fall to the floor. All the other patrons turn to glare. How dare we delight in the swoop of blossom and neck? I know it sounds like turning into a plant would not be fun, but have you seen a Baja fairy duster? The way it shocks the mountain trail, how it asterisks all year round? Perhaps you think I'd be sad to rely on sunlight and sea spray, that I would rather wither in the dark, but trust me, some people wait whole pink and proper lives to feel this even once. I'm going to read this collection. And for those of you who don't know, I had a list of 200 plants and animals, and I whittled it down. It was a very painstaking process, kind of a hurtful process. I'm still not over it. From 200 to 30. That was a lot of plants and animals that I said goodbye to. But only on the page, not in my heart. One of the first ones that was in the collection, though, that I knew was going to be in the collection, there was no way I would battle to the end if they asked me to cut it, was the narwhal. And then I just want to mention, when I started writing this, almost nobody I talked to in casual conversation knew what a narwhal is. And I'm not taking credit for it, but now there's narwhal t-shirts, narwhal socks, kind of narwhals. They didn't jump the shark yet, but they are, like, you can get t-shirts of them at Target. So that did not exist 10 years ago. Anyway, I'm just saying. This is the narwhal. My sister and I moved from Phoenix to Kansas at the end of 5th grade, this time leaving my father behind, along with a year of jelly sandals and new Coke and trying to catch Madonna on the Live Aid concert. My girlfriends in Arizona and I had swatches and jelly bracelets stacked up on our thin brown wrists. All the boys I crushed on could break dance. The only things I knew of Kansas were Dorothy and the Wizard and tornadoes pointing their creepy fingers all over the state. My mom promised us a giant yard with abundant space to play soccer or throw a football, but I didn't fully understand until we moved just how close to her workplace she meant when she talked about the mental hospital and our home. You see, we lived on the grounds of the mental institution, something no kids had done in decades, and the school district had to create a bus stop just for my sister and I. When I climbed the school bus steps, I imagined myself a narwhal with one giant snaggletooth, a saber, to knock into anyone who would ask if my sister and I were patients there. What better animal than the narwhal to blend in with all that cans and ice, all that white, all that snow? And what better animal to hold its own there? The narwhal is most content swimming in chunky ice rather than open sea and can outrace most orca. They hunt formidably despite their cartoonish look and silly nickname, the unicorns of the sea, as Jules Verne first called them in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But see, the narwhal's horn is actually a tooth with about 10 million nerve endings, a long spiraled tooth that pokes through the upper left lip into the chilly Arctic Ocean. It's one of only 2 teeth they'll ever get in their lifetimes. All males have this long in the tooth situation, but about 15% of female narwhals also have one, and some narwhals even have a double horn. No orthodontics magic can fix that affair. For a long time, scientists thought this tooth was just a hunting tool because narwhals were observed poking smaller fish with it to stun them before gobbling them up. But now it's been widely accepted that this tooth also helps narwhals see underwater by having some of the most directed echolocation of any animal. That's including bats. Scientists believe that a narwhal can make up to 1,000 clicks per second that then can be transmitted out in narrow or wide rays to search for food or to avoid ice. The tusk is a kind of sensory wand. It is sensitive to salt levels of the ocean and temperature changes too. The tooth is surrounded by a soft and porous layer and filled with a dense inner core packed with delicate nerve endings connected to its brain. Imagine how your teeth would feel after nibbling 2 to 3 popsicles in a row, and then bowl and bowl and bowl after bowl after bowl after bowl of ice cream. Imagine a perpetual state of brain freeze in your mouth. Now, narwhals are found mainly in the Arctic Ocean, but occasionally a small pod of them wanders into a Canadian fjord. The word narwhal comes from the Old Norse word nar, meaning like a corpse, due to the distinctive mottled skin that looks like the spotted sea color of drowned sailors. Narwhals don't have a dorsal fin, and they have vertebrae in their neck that allow them to do a whale of a double take. The only other whales that share these unique traits are beluga. Now, narwhals eat cuttlefish, cod, and armhook squid. Nothing too disturbing, right? But it's the way narwhals eat that could be alarming. A narwhal will swim up to its food, slow and stealthy-like, slow, as steady and quiet as possible, and then slowly but surely open its mouth and inhale like the world's scariest vacuum. Now, did I mention that narwhals like to swim upside down? Can you imagine seeing a 3,000-pound narwhal sidling up to you upside down and slowly starting to open its mouth? Just who are these toothy creatures' predators? Orcas and the occasional polar bears sometimes hunt baby narwhals. When orcas go after an entire pod, the narwhals just dive. They can survive at almost 5,000 feet below sea level. And yet narwhals are classified as almost threatened because humans, of course humans, hunt them for their teeth and valuable fat supply. Now, one afternoon in Kansas, my sister and I were riding the school bus back to the doctor's quarters. As we neared home, I saw my mom in our driveway unpacking groceries from the car. A chunky blonde boy on the bus turned around and asked me if my mom was Chinese. When I said no, she's actually Filipino, he flipped his eyelids inside out, and it made everybody cringe and groan. I can still picture, do you know what I'm talking about when I say flip eyelids inside out? Okay, sometimes I've read that and people have no idea. You could flip, don't do it, please. You can flip your eyelids and then leave it there. Do you know what okay, sorry. It used to be a thing. Thankfully, I think kids don't do that anymore. I can picture still the greasy, dark, who knows what jammed under these nails. I can see his belly hanging over his Wrangler jeans as he chortled at his own joke. And then, as if flipping his eyelids wasn't enough, he tugged at the corner of his eyes and pulled them back to his ears. I bet she's Chinese. Her eyes don't even look like yours. Ice, snow. The white plastic of the milk jug she was carrying in each hand as she smiled at the bus, scanning the faces of all those staring kids for her own. I wanted to dive deep into the darkest of seas so no orcas could find me. I had no sword, and worse, no sharp tongue yet with which to sass him back. Instead, I just stared straight ahead, gathered up my books, and left without saying goodbye to poor Mr. Johnson, the kindly driver. But the narwhal taught me what it was like to see through sound, what that boy, someone I would have called my friend until that actual day, what he really was. Back then in 6th grade, all I could see was the dirty snow kicked up in the street by hospital security patrolling for escapees. I know I was quiet that night, and I couldn't figure out why. I didn't have the words. It wasn't shame exactly. It wasn't anger exactly, but something like a wasp's stinger in the fleshy pad just under my thumb. The pain lingered. Later that spring, a different boy, the smartest, the fastest runner in the class, gave me a ring set with pink faux zirconia the day after he found out we were moving. To remember me by, he said quietly at recess. The gems sparkled, but even then I blanched. I barely liked boys then, and I thought even then it was too much attention, too much shine, too serious. All I really wanted was for him to keep picking me first in kickball, have my back if anyone else cracked some racist joke to me again, or maybe sit next to me in the cafeteria once in a while. But it was too late. We were going back to Arizona. Still, I had learned in Kansas that there was more to this flat state than a whirl of wind and yellow brick roads, that there were good kids here, kids who, no matter what they learned from television or their own parents, would still reach out for my hand, for a hug, who would miss me on the playground, and they'll miss the way I loved to hang upside down from the monkey bars with my knees and yelp at the clouds at my feet. I learned that all sunflowers eventually turn towards the sun. Sunflowers so full, my mom would stop her little Chevy Chevrolet on the side of the road and snap pictures of me and my sister in front of a whole field to send back to my dad. We miss you. We're doing fine in Kansas, but we miss you, and we'll see you soon. This was our signal, sent across the sea of flowers to my dad 5 states away. We're okay. Our pod had stuck together. We had made it through the ice and snow and into the spring. Our pod was safe. And now I want to just change it up a little bit. I think there's no way to get lights down in here. I think it'll be okay. If not, don't worry about it. Can we turn off the lights? And I know people's mentioned this before, but for everybody else, while they're thinking about it, if you can't, great. If not, can you all get out your phones and turn on the lights? We got to set the mood just a little bit here. I want to recreate what it's like to see fireflies. If you have a phone that has a light, yeah, go ahead and turn it on. Oh my gosh, look how pretty. So pretty, pretty. Yeah, turn them on. And you don't have to do this for the whole thing, just like the first couple paragraphs. I want you all to remember what it's like to see, oh my gosh, those of you in the front, you got to turn around and look at this, so pretty. What it was like to see a field of fireflies like this. Oh my gosh, so nice. All right, if you could just hold it up, pretend we're like at a Harry Styles concert or something like that. Just for a little bit. All right. Do any of you remember what it was like when the first pops of fireflies or lightning bugs lit up the early evening in your childhood? I bet if you were like me, each grab and tuck in the air made the small hairs on the back of your neck and around your face damp with summer sweat. All right, you can put them down now. Picture this. A few years ago, I was finishing up a 10-month residency at the Grisham Estate, the former home of the writer John Grisham, on 77 acres just outside of Oxford, Mississippi. It is highly possible my family will never have that much land to ourselves ever again, so most of our time was spent outdoors. One of the many reasons my husband, who also teaches with me, one of the many reasons my husband and I wanted to stay in this area after the residency was because we could spend more time in the outdoors in this beautiful town, this velvet ditch, as the locals called it, because of its green and verdant foliage in the northern part of Mississippi. One of the biggest treats during that final week at the estate was the abundance of fireflies. With the lights to the estate completely turned off, at first we saw nothing, but patience was soon rewarded when a majestic illumination dotted the already humid air. That year, under so much wide open sky and not having to worry about oncoming cars, my sons could finally see the stars without much light pollution for the first time in their young lives. They could pick out constellations readily because when I lived in Arizona, their grandfather once showed me how to do the same. When we lose our childlike capacity for wonder and how to be curious about the planet, when we don't allow ourselves to be astonished, we lose the capacity to imagine lives and hearts of others who are different than us. What is lost, for example, when you grow up not knowing the names for all the different varieties of fireflies and not even being curious about insects at all? What happens when you don't have these firefly names ready to pop on your tongue? Okay, there's actually a whole bunch more fireflies, but I'm just giving you my favorites here, all right? Check this out, and if you don't know these names, you have to fix your life and figure out all the names of these fireflies. They're so amazing. The shadow ghosts, the sidewinder, the Florida sprite, the Mr. Mac, little grays, murky flash trains, the Texas tinies, the single snappies, the treetop flashers, a July comet, the tropic traveler, Christmas lights, a slow blue, a tiny Lucy, the mischievous marsh imp, the sneaky elves, and in a tie for my personal favorite, the heebie-jeebies and the wiggle dancers. Scientists still don't know how or when fireflies stay visually silent. Even entomologists can admit they don't have all the answers. Even though a field of tall grass can teem with fireflies, the space and time between flashes grows longer over the years. My sons want to know the answer to these increasing silences too. There is so much I do not know about the natural world, but I view that curiosity as a good thing, a space where I could feel alive and where my pulse quickens because I genuinely want to know the hows and the whys of creatures and plants with whom I share this planet. Let's get back to being vulnerable and admit there is so much we don't know and yet would still like to learn. Maybe start with what you loved as kids, like fireflies, and see where that leads you. Because when wonder is a practice, we feel less alone. Let me say that again. When wonder is a practice, we feel less alone. A single firefly might be the spark that sends us back to our grandmother's backyard to listen for whippoorwills, the spark that sends us back into splashing in an ice-cold creek bed with our toes fully wrinkled. In that spark is a slowdown and tenderness. And perhaps that spark can light a path to remind ourselves if we let ourselves be astonished by a range of voices, if you remember and relearn how to wonder, you set the groundwork for cultivating a more tender and just world. Simply put, if you remember how to be curious about this planet, about the world, about others, you will never feel bored or lonely on this planet. I promise you. Here it is, folks, for the writers in the audience here. I'm going to wind it up with this. This is my #1 no-fail guide for writing success. #1, floss. You need to keep your teeth healthy, folks, because you're laughing, but those, you know that gums are related to your heart, and if you have nasty teeth, you have a nasty heart, and you won't be able to write. So floss, 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 floss. Say thank you. Be kind. It's free to be kind. And lastly, be curious. The world is full of wonders. All you have to do is remember what it's like to let yourself be astonished. Be hungry for knowledge. And finally, stay curious. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Aimee. I'm now pleased to introduce our moderator for the evening, Ross Gay. Ross is the author of 4 books of poetry, Against Which, Bringing the Shovel Down, Beholding, which was winner of the PEN American Literary Gene Stein Award, and also, I should say, the Indiana Authors Awards this year, and catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, winner of the 2015 National Book Critics Circle Award and the 2016 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. His first collection of essays, The Book of Delights, was released in 2019 and was a New York Times bestseller. His new collection of essays, Inciting Joy, will be released by Algonquin in October of 2022, so get excited for that. Please join me in welcoming Ross.
Good mic. I brought, because Aimee's not from here, pawpaws. And the thing is that, what you don't know is that I really want Aimee to eat it now because it would get all over her and it would be very uncomfortable for her. But I'm not going to make her because we're friends.
You know me all too well. You know that I would be like, you're not going to.
I know. Thank you very much. Beautiful reading. Well done. It's wonderful. So, it was kind of lovely at the end of that piece. You start to talk about, start to talk about if you cultivate this practice of wonder, I forget exactly how you put it, but how did you put it exactly? That you will, If wonder is a practice, you'll never be lonely. But there's also an element of like, you talked about justice, and you talked about like, if wonder is a practice, it felt like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but that you will be inclined effectively to ask questions of other people. You won't be, you know. Anyway, that kind of ballpark thing is what I want you to start off with. Like, what do you mean? Say more about that. And maybe even when you say more about that, could you say an example of the recent past where you've had that experience?
Sure. Hello? Okay. Well, I love the question so much. And, you know, like, I guess maybe give an example a little bit more of what you were saying, of what I was saying, or like.
Yeah, when you talk about wonder, if you open yourself to wonder, you'll never be lonely.
Yeah.
But you also said something, I wish I could remember, I thought, I'm going to remember that one. And then you said something really good right after, and I was like, shit, I'm going to remember that. But it was something like, it wasn't this, but I'll say it, because it's sort of, if you said something that approximated or made me feel something like, if you open yourself to wonder, you will be less likely to be cruel.
Yeah, when you have the capacity to imagine lives and animals and beings that are different than us, then I just think that we'll have kind of less of a, I don't know, appetite to want to hurt other people, you know, that kind of thing. There's a tenderness and a justness. You want to make that world just and tender for those living beings other than yourself, you know. So, for example, if you know that this patch of forest is home to the indigo bunting, maybe you might not want to put a car wash there anymore, you know. And if you don't know an indigo bunting, oh my goodness, it's the most spectacular turquoise, bright flash. It's one of the harbingers of spring. I think they're in Indiana. I think so. Indigo. Okay, all the bird watchers here. Oh, hi. Oh, I'm sorry. I just saw you here. If you can imagine that there's certain fish, and this is called a jawfish, that carry so gentle. I'm not going to do it here because I look ridiculous. They gently carry their eggs in their mouth, so they constantly look like they have a bunch of marbles in their mouth, and then they just like part their lips just a little bit, so you just see these little babies in their mouth. I don't know how you can just scoop out that beach and put up a condo there, you know, that kind of thing. My hope is that even if you've never met anybody from Afghanistan, and you must imagine that there's out there somewhere, there's a mother in that country who pulls up their a blanket to her son's neck. How could you want to just call that collateral damage, you know, that kind of thing, if you wipe away their village? So it's this thing of like, the more you get to kind of turn your eye and be curious about how other things live, I just think, I don't know how you can be cruel to that anymore, you know, that kind of thing. It's not going to be perfect, but I think it decreases the want to be cruel.
So partly, and I love that, because partly, and I'm going to keep on going on that, because what you were just saying is talking about if you know.
Yeah.
And my understanding of wonder is, in a way, the understanding and the perpetual, when you talk about a practice, it's a continual unknowing.
Absolutely. I knew you were going to say this. I knew it.
So go on from there. Yeah.
Okay, so Ross says that it's the unknowing that makes you curious, but I would at least just gently add to that, not to counter, but just to gently add to that I think that knowledge, that knowing about these plants and animals or other people that are different than us, people who love differently, who move differently, who are just different backgrounds entirely, I think it's contagious. So the more, it's almost like, you know, isn't that it's a gift now, but in the 80s it used to be the more you know, and then there'd be like stars and rainbows. The more you know, I feel like that's more, like that knowledge becomes more and more contagious. When I first learned about the jawfish, I wanted to know what other fish do that, carry their little babies peeking out of their mouth, and just what are the males that do that, and what are the male species that do that? I just, you know, so I see what you're saying totally, but it's I don't know, to me, once you get that knowledge, how could you not want to know more? How could you not want to be like, oh, okay, so there's a mom there in Afghanistan. What do they eat? What do they say? What do they hope for? What do they wish for? What are their fears? You know, that kind of thing. I just feel like that knowledge, that wonder begets wonder, begets wonder. So absolutely, I guess I'm just assuming that once you learn about plants and animals, and just find something that sparks an interest in you, you'll want to just be a perpetual student of that animal or creature or other people, just want to learn more.
Yeah, so I think we're kind of, hanging around the same thing, which is that if I understand it, that the learning a thing makes you understand you know nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's still so much more to learn.
Right.
I don't ever want to, I'm a full professor at the University of Mississippi. I don't want to ever say I'm the master of poetry, that kind of thing, even though that's technically my degree. I always what I would rather be is just a student of this planet, like a student. Like if I ever say that I've learned all there is to know about narwhals or anything, please gently put me aside to the curb, That's when I'm no good in the classroom, no good as a human. I want to always be learning things, that kind of thing. So
how does that look in your classes? And partly I asked that, and I kind of want to ask that in the setting, like we're in a university on the university's campus, and universities are ostensibly the highest, the best moments of the university are these moments of curiosity and wonder. I think often, primarily, they're more like sites of sort of compulsion and obedience and the kind of squelching of there. That's actually my. There's like a little bench out here that says "Think critically."
Oh no! Is there really?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do, but I don't think that's what we really do here.
Yeah.
Wonder is all about thinking critically, I think, in part because we know that there's all this to know.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, because you have been a professor now for a little while, and you teach a lot of students, and your students love you. And so how do you think about wonder in the classroom? And also, how do you think about wonder in a context where, in a way, my opinion anyway, like all of these sort of mechanisms for squelching wonder, like grading, like all of these sort of all of these things that have nothing to do with learning or wonder, they have to do with completion and accomplishment and mastery.
Absolutely. Oh, such a good question. And there's like, A through E answers there. So I don't know if I'll get to all of them, but I'll try to dance my way around and hit each spot. Well, I think first of all, cultivating wonder in the classroom or just in life is kind of modeling it yourself to be vulnerable, to say, I don't know everything there is to know about all the creatures of the sea or all the birds, that kind of thing. And that's okay. And that's a good thing. We should be saying that, we don't know all there is to know, that kind of thing. The most insufferable people in your lives are the ones who are the know-it-alls, the ones who don't want help from anybody or don't want to take advice or have advisors. And we see what happens when those people get into positions of power. They're insufferable. They don't seem to seek any new possibility that their worldview might change. And to me, that's a tragedy. That is a tragedy. So I think one thing that we can do to help avoid that is to first of all say, my first day of classes, I say that I'm going to be learning too. There's going to be plenty of things where I mess up, and that's also okay. And I call, I know at some point we have to do some sort of grade, but I also just hammer it home so they hear it all the time that we are experimenting. We are experimenting. Some things you're going to like the result of this experiment. Sometimes you're going to be meh, but that's also okay. To get to the dazzling, the sparkle, we have to have some many, many meh moments, that kind of thing. So I think if we're just kind of constantly, when I think of workshop, for example, I think of going back to that word, make. We're making things. Sometimes we're learning how to make a pie crust. Sometimes we're learning how to make poems, but we are making things constantly. And when you're making that much stuff, you're going to have success. You're going to have things that excite you, and you're going to have things that you're like, whoa, I should not be doing that ever again, that kind of thing. So I think all too often, I think I've been in situations where the person leading a workshop or the person who's leading a bird watching group is just like, I know all there is to know about birds in Mississippi, and you can't teach me otherwise. And then, no roseate spoonbills, for example, have been seen in Oxford. And then 2 weeks later, a roseate spoonbill is there. Well, that must have been some other pink bird. There's no other pink bird except for a flamingo on this planet. It's the roseate spoonbill or a flamingo, and I know it wasn't a flamingo. So, again, insufferable, you know what I mean? So I guess I just would say this whole thing of wonder, this whole thing of like trying to cultivate this kind of sense of magic and mystery is trying to not be an insufferable human. Let yourself be vulnerable and let yourself be a student. Always be a student of something.
What makes you, or like, how do you keep yourself? Because when you were saying that about, know-it-all people, I was like, yeah, that's me sometimes, and I assume it's most of us.
Yeah, sure.
So are there ways that when you catch yourself getting into that, or you see yourself, are there like practices? Because I feel like a wonder practice is also to sort of like when we become masters, to somehow disable that quality or the things that bring that quality, which are all of these things like, insecurity, fear, blah, blah, blah. We know everything when we're afraid, So that's one of the things that we seem to do.
Yeah.
So can you think of that? How do you think about that? Because again, I also think as a teacher, I think it's an important thing because students, again, are compelled to be masters. They're compelled and they're encouraged to become masters. And really what we want them to be is, it sounds like you would rather
a student of the planet and be experimenting all the time, So what was your question exactly?
My question is how given the fact that this is not an uncommon human phenomenon,
gotcha.
how do you, when you become a kind of know-it-all, when you sort of shut it down and you know everything, whether that's about like a landscape or your garden or the people across the tracks, you know what I mean? What do you do?
Well, it's so, I don't want to like pat myself on the back and say it never happens because it does, I'm human. But I think it just happens so rarely. I mean, if you spend any time with students, or more specifically, children in particular, my boys, when I started writing the book, my boys were 6 and 9. Now they're 15 and 12 and completely sassy. Or what I would say, they have no qualms about correcting or asking questions of their mother, the science writer, the nature writer, the poet, that kind of thing. So they absolutely keep me in check, but my students keep me in check, or they'll just ask questions. I think just making myself a person who people can ask questions of and where I won't fall apart if my authority is challenged or if I'm questioned or anything like that. I absolutely love it in some ways. It gets me nervous when nobody's questioning me. It gets me nervous if I'm leading a bird watching tour and nobody has kind of questions or is calling me out like, I don't see the whatever you're seeing, that kind of thing. So, again, I don't want to say it never happens. It happens rarely. And when I do, I guess I turn myself inward to say, don't be insufferable. Don't be the know-it-all on anything, that kind of thing. And that's a life lesson. That's not going to get you an A. That's going to get you an A in life. Nobody wants to be a partner to someone who's a know-it-all or who doesn't take any advice or anything like that. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
It's nice. It sounds like some of the situations that can encourage us to become know-it-alls. It seems like you try to figure out how to make them compel you to be curious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like kids, students,
Yeah.
Where are the places in your life right now that are that are like these sort of sites of wonder? Because we write about gardens.
Sure.
And so I'm sort of curious, like where are you these days, like being wonderstruck?
Yeah, oh my goodness, and that could be a whole 20 minutes on that. That's like almost an impossible question. What am I wondering about today? What are my sites of wonder today? Well, I'm checking. The last thing I did at my garden at home was check on my okra. The center of an okra blossom, this is just so, it's the most sanguine red. It's almost an impossible red, but then you get this butter yellow around it. It almost makes me just want to cry. But I have no idea why. What I'm wondering about is why my okra is so good this year, and last year I think I had 2. I had so many flowers, and this year I had just okra out the wazoo, so there's that. But also, I'm actually, I'm always going to be curious. I mean, there's so many developments that happened with the narwhals just since 2020 that I wish that I could, slide in addendums in all the bookstores like, P.S., there's this and that. There's so much new knowledge about that. One sad bit of knowledge, and this is wonder in a different way that has sadness to it, is just in the last month, and I work for Sierra Club, so this is my phone was blowing up, and I was thinking, what's going on? It was monarch butterflies were classified as endangered for the first time ever since they've been classifying animals endangered or not. And so that was heartbreaking. For as long as you've known me, you know how much I love seeing the chartreuse chrysalises, just all along our fence. We've had like three, and usually we have 30. So that's wonder in a different way. I'm curious about how am I gonna get my neighbors to stop spraying? I'm gonna, how do they plant more milkweed, which is the only food of monarch butterflies? So if people don't have milkweed in every yard, these butterflies that are on the cover are gonna be just a figment of imagination now, that kind of thing. Right now, the thing that's occupying my time on the page is I'm working on a book of little food. I don't know if I'd call them wonders, but they're small little essays on food and kind of the natural history of different ingredients. So the natural history of cinnamon, which is so fascinating. And I'm a total nerd, I know, but it's the truth. Natural history of apples, cinnamon, mint, things like that. So watermelon, yes. A couple months ago, can I share that? Yeah. A couple months ago, I hadn't seen Ross in 3 years, basically. And I've been doing the research. Apparently the sweetest watermelon in the country is in Arkansas, in this small, teeny town called Cave City. And who better than this gentleman right here I didn't want to go by myself. It's the Ozarks, essentially. And I haven't been on a road trip in 3 years, that kind of thing. So, and I think we can confirm it was the sweetest crystalline watermelon ever. And I asked them, it's as cold as they could get it without the watermelon actually freezing. So imagine that. It was just pure red sugar in your mouth. It was, now I'm going to be hungry for it now. I know, just thinking it.
I know, it was amazing. And there's all these, it was such a lovely event, but at the end they pull up a refrigerated truck and they give you not a little piece of watermelon, like a gigantic.
They slice the watermelon lengthways, so you have a smile of
Yeah.
watermelon all to yourself. You don't have to share it.
It's incredible.
And sometimes this guy's a little hard to impress or anything. And so if Ross says the watermelon was sweet, that means it was extra sweet.
I want to be mindful of the Q&A time. Okay, then let me ask one more question, if I can, and then we'll do that. And maybe my mind is somewhere, but I also, because the way when you talked about monarchs, I have kind of an overlapping question, and it's vague, like the rest of my questions.
Oh, goody.
And it's like, what's the relationship between wonder and heartbreak? And what's the relationship between wonder and love? Little ones. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, well that's an essay of an answer there, so I'm trying to figure out how to distill it. Well, for the second one, that's a little bit easier, and that is wonder and love to me are interconnected. I can't separate them, and it's just me. This is not prescriptive. I don't want to be one of those writers who said, I do this, so therefore you must all do this. But for me, I know that when I get a finger wagged at me, like, you should do this because we're all going to die if you don't, or you should do this and recycle in this way, or whatever, it's a little overwhelming. All I want to do is put one of those weighted blankets over me and just hide. The times when I actually do action, when I actually march, or actually write letters to politicians, or actually get up and start a garden somewhere, that kind of thing. has been out of love, not fear, not hate, not anger, but it's been love. So, love for the indigo buntings, love for my close ones, my friends and family, love for different animals, love for trees. That's when I am activated. That's when I want to be an activist more than anything. When I am working from love, I have boundless energy. So I was very conscious of that for myself, because there's so many books that are very gloom and doom and that'll scare the bejeebies out of you. And that's fine and good. That's not what I wanted to do. So I wanted to absolutely start this book and end this book with love. So that even if you know what a monarch butterfly is, hopefully you'll find something new about it, and that will spur you to plant milkweed. Or maybe you didn't know what an axolotl was, but hopefully that'll spur you to do your own research into it. And what are axolotls being cut open for again and again and again for medical experiences? And that's something that's also an addendum that I wanted to add. This just happened 2 weeks ago. Now apparently, so axolotls, it's the pink little guy. Is he not here? Oh, he's on the cover. The pink salamander on the cover. They're known, they're helpful in experiments because you can, I'm distilling this down, but you can cut off their arms and legs and their skin and it will regenerate. Now they've found, and this is kind of terrible, but that their brains will also regenerate, which means they have been slicing their brains like cheese. I don't know how long this has been going on, but there's something that's, unsettling, in that way. So my hope is that this is not a book that's just Pippi Longstocking, everything's okay, and all these plants and animals and trees are beautiful, and everything's fine and dandy. I purposely included some kind of scary and not so great situations and sadness and my own experiences growing up with microaggressions, but also hopefully such exquisite moments of wonder and curiosity and love. And my hope is that people see that and say, oh gosh, I have so much of that in my own life. I just have to let myself remember that. I have to let myself get to that open space where I can remember how much there is to love on this planet now, and like I said, the thing with the monarchs, gosh, I hope that's the only animal from the 30 that has that classification now of endangered. I don't want to come visit in another 5 years and have 4 more start to disappear from my table of contents, that kind of thing. So there's much to be done, but there's also so much that is yet to be an opening for your own hearts and for your own brains to get to that sense of vulnerability and tenderness, that we can say, gosh, I didn't even know this existed, and that's okay. And I don't know it all, and I'm allowed to be a student again. Even at my advanced age, or even at 10 years old, I can still be a student. Not because there's a grade, but because that's what it is to be a human. That's what it is to be tender with each other. Yeah.
All right, let's, thank you. Let's do questions from the audience.
So I always say it's that first question is always the rough one. No question is too big or no question is too small. Go for it. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I actually, so the question is, do I speak to kids ever, that kind of thing? The answer is yes. I've been doing that. I've been, going into elementary school classrooms has been such a joy since I was in grad school and thought I would never have kids. I don't want to be married. I just love that because kids, why? Kids have a sense of wonder. You don't ever have to teach them how to be curious. They're curious. You walk in and their first thing is, look at this, look at the moon, look at this, or why this? Why is there a rainbow? Why? And yeah. That's when it starts to taper off. Not always, but if I had to say where it starts to taper off, it's 12, 13. It's puberty. It's just like they're a little too cool for school. Like I could see their eyes are sparkling when I talk about the axolotl, but it's like, wait, did the captain of the football team like it too? You know, that kind of thing. Not always, but sometimes, sometimes. Some, like myself and like Ross, never lose their sense of wonder, but I would say around maybe middle school. But there's something so magical, and I love it so much, going into elementary schools. And they also, elementary school kids, I think, and it's no shade to my college students or my grad students, they have some of the best capacities for metaphor. They speak in metaphor, So just what I mean by that is, and it's not labored, that kind of thing. Like there was a classroom not too long ago I visited, and it was a 7-year-old. And I didn't know this. This little boy's mother had passed away from cancer. And I was their first school visitor since this happened. Nobody gave me a heads up or anything like that. So I was kind of peppering him with questions, that kind of thing. One of the lines I'll never forget from his poem was, instead of saying, "I feel sad," he said, "I keep a cloud in my pocket, 2 clouds in my pocket, one for me and one for my mom." And I just thought that was one of the most beautiful lines. And it's like, it took my breath away. I carry a cloud in my pocket rather than saying, "I feel sad," or "I'm not feeling great today," that kind of thing. Sorry, I'm such a dork, but it takes my breath away because that was natural. Yes, I love working with kids, but I really didn't have to do a thing. That's how he expressed the sadness, this loss, is to say, I carry a cloud in my pocket, 2 clouds in my pocket. And something happens, though, again, in that middle school age, I think, when we lose that capacity for just being bold. You had to be pretty vulnerable to say that. And the reason why I remember it is because after he said it, 2 boys got up and hugged him. This is 7 years old. And I did not have to, the teacher didn't prompt them. I get teary-eyed thinking about it again. And it's like, that's what we have the capacity to be if we let ourselves be vulnerable, if we let ourselves to take notice of the outside world. And, I always say Mother Nature is the best poet. I'm just trying to take notes, And that boy maybe never had the words to say, "I am sad," to admit that. But he absolutely was fearless in saying, "I carry 2 clouds in my pocket." And that was enough. He spoke a language that was enough for other boys in the class to get up and hug him. That's why I remember it so well, because I didn't know what was going on. I knew it was magical, and it wasn't until later, after the class, where a teacher pulled me inside and said, "Oh, so-and-so's mom died last month or 2 months ago." So, yeah, to answer your question, I love being in the classroom, but there's something so magical about talking with children, because you never have to convince them to be curious. You never have to convince them to speak in metaphor, and you never have to convince them to be vulnerable, that kind of thing. So, be like kids. Be like kids. What else? Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. So for those of you in the back, were there other animals? Yeah, I told you I had 200 animals, so like the B-sides. But part of it was self-editing. I also, this is not my first rodeo, so I know, Robert Frost says, "No surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader." As much as I loved or adored some of these animals, I wasn't feeling like I was going anywhere new with it. I could wax poetic about any number of animals, but I wasn't surprising myself. I wasn't feeling that language, snap, crackle, and pop. I always say that there's 26 letters in the alphabet. It's one of the smallest alphabets in the world, but there's so much magic that you can do with 26 letters. I just wasn't feeling it in those poems, in those essays. So, but there's one in particular, and this is the other homework assignment. If you don't know what a Baja fairy duster is, look that up. The other one is my second favorite cephalopod of all time, and it's the blanket octopus. If you don't know what a blanket octopus is, fix your life again. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I don't know how anyone is in a bad mood when you see it. You have to watch it move, not just look at it. Watch how the blanket octopus moves. That one, if I had another chance to do it again, I would find a way to get that in. That's my one regret. But also too, I wanted it to be, each one of these essays could have been the entire book. I could have done an entire book on the vampire squid, an entire book on the narwhal. I really wanted to kind of get in and get out of these spaces, but also I wanted to, and this was my kids. Oh, actually, this goes back to your question, to circle back. I had no intention of this ever being a book. This was for 2 pairs of eyes only, a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and those were my sons. These were bedtime stories. So I wasn't like, today I'm going to write about animals today, and I'm going to put them all in a book. Absolutely not. It was an accident. I know the day that I started this was because it was the first time my then 9-year-old came home and said, "Mommy, what does build that wall mean?" He had heard it in school, and he sat with a bunch of kind of mixed kids. There's half Vietnamese, there's half Latinx, and then he's half white. And a group of kids, this was our first year in Oxford, were chanting "Build That Wall" to their table at lunch. So I'm not presuming that we all believe the same stuff, but I'm hoping that we all see that is pretty cruel and terrible to do to a 9-year-old, that kind of thing, or to anybody. And I don't know what I answered him. I'm sure I bungled my answer. I'm sure I was kind of stumbling around because at the time, we kind of like sheltered them from the news. Again, 2016, there were swear words regularly being on the news, that kind of thing. So it was, I didn't want to shelter them, but a lot of it was my answer on what build this wall means, but then also, and then they would ask me questions. "Mommy, did you ever feel lonesome? Did you ever feel alone?" And I was like, "Actually, I did in 6th grade," that kind of thing. But let's talk about narwhals and, that kind of thing. That's actually my brain process of that. So after they went to bed, so I didn't shy away from telling them parts of my life story, but I wanted them to end on a bit of wonder and curiosity. So many times it was questions like, "I thought that was a horn. That's the tooth. How is that a tooth?" That kind of thing. So I hope, we'll see in about 20 years, if they can remember going to bed in this kind of drifting off with all of these animals and plants in the back of their mind. After they went to bed, I'd type them up. And I still didn't know what I was doing. I just wanted to save it just to say, hey, this is what we talked about during this time. I thought I was just going to be in Mississippi for 10 months. And then they started slowly getting published. But absolutely, it was kind of accidental. It was nothing that I was planning on doing it at all. And I think if you're a discerning reader, you can see there's still very much, as I was revising it, I was imagining my dear friends, Ross is one of them, to talk, like, how do I not bore people going on and on about a narwhal or a vampire squid or anything like that. But you could still see parts of that, hopefully that tenderness of talking to a 6 and 9-year-old to help them get to bed, but also to say there's so much to love on this planet. Don't worry. Such a good question. I promise my answers will be shorter. What else? Oh, yes, hi. Sorry, I didn't see you.
So I'm curious, just in addition to some of the plants and animals that you've written about, what are some of the places you've visited that you found to be really awe-inspiring or wonder-inspiring?
Such a good question. Well, I was, oh my goodness, I would be remiss. My father's from India, my mother's from the Philippines, and as my dad likes to say, we were green before it was cool to be green. Kerala is where he's from, the southern tip of India. And so this whole Earth Day, he's always like, every day is Earth Day, and that kind of thing. If you haven't been to the southern part of, I can't do an Indian accent, but his a Malayalam accent. He has a beautiful accent. The southern coast of India is called the Emerald Coast for good reason. It's just, the palm trees are swooping over. If you squint, the palm trees look like green asterisks. My My grandfather had a family elephant who would actually weep when he went away to work, and I would never have believed it till I saw it with my own eyes, and then wag his tail with joy when he came back. The first time I ever saw an elephant was in my grandfather's backyard, not in a zoo. And I still have that visceral memory of my wrist being nibbled when I was feeding it sugar cane. So just nibbled ever so gently, it was a little scary for an 8-year-old girl, but it was, I'll never forget that for as long as I live. So India for sure, but also I would say Mississippi. I know 5 years ago I would never have said this. I had a lot of preconceived notions about Mississippi, but in the north is kind of birder's paradise. So I live just outside of Memphis in North Mississippi. It's so green, and it's just, if you let yourself be still in early May is the best, because not only do you have fireflies that are one of the 4 spots in this country that are synchronized, so it's not just like twinkle, 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 it's blink, 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 blink. The whole thing is just, it's like a heartbeat. And then eventually, if you're out there long enough and not making noise, it does become a heartbeat. It is I've never been able to write it yet. I almost don't want to write it, but it's just suddenly you're out there, you don't even realize it, and then it's just blink, 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 blink. And they reset anytime they see a car light or someone puts up their freaking phone or something like that. They reset, but then if you stay still again, it'll be like heartbeat, boom, 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 boom. So, I mean, I'm kind of one of those annoying people that can find that magical place anywhere, but I'd say India and Mississippi. And I found out that just yesterday, Indiana's state insect is the firefly. Yeah. Did you all know that? There you go. Or the lightning bug, I was corrected. You all say lightning bugs here. We say fireflies. I say fireflies. Good. What else? Maybe one more question? Or 2 more questions?
Hello.
Hi. By the way, I love your color mask. That is my single favorite color right there, peacock blue. Beautiful.
I have a question about hope.
About
Hope.
okay.
There's so many beautiful things that you talk about and so many practices of wonder for the beautiful things around us. I think Ross, as a teacher, also teaches this in his classes. To notice what we love all the time. But also just given the moment that we live in, right? Like this era of so much death, of extinction after extinction. And there's an abolitionist organizer, Mariam Kaba, who says hope is a discipline. So I'm just curious how you maintain hope in the midst of the despair of the things that we love disappearing all the time. How do you make hope into a discipline?
Gosh, so that's a great essay prompt right there too as well. So I love that question. It's so beautiful. Are you asking actual concrete examples of how to do this, not just in theory, but how do you actually do this in the face of so much death and sorrow? Is that what you're, okay, I just want to be sure. I want to be sure. I would say it is, and I want people to see it on my face. It is not easy. Especially in 2020, it was not easy. Are you kidding me? I'd be so false to say that, I was sitting there every day. I mean, Ross knows this. We would FaceTime or Zoom, and it was just really, those were heavy days. My grandmother was dying at the time, and she did end up passing. And my father is the oldest son. His whole family was not able to see, was not able to be there at the funeral because of the travel restrictions. So that's something that I still am I'm the oldest grandchild, and I was not there. I was the only, my sister and I were the only grandchildren not there. So it is absolutely, and it's still ongoing. That's just my own personal experience. It's still ongoing, all manners of loss, big and small. I guess what I would say is, and again, this is not prescriptive, but just something that works for me, is to kind of, I don't know how to, I don't know, that's such a good question. I don't know how to say this, so I'm choosing my words very carefully. I know what I want to say, I'm just choosing them carefully. I would say it's to be grateful for our, if you are in despair or if you have lost something, I'm trying to not sound like a TED speaker, TEDx speaker or something like that, but I would say that the times that I've had the greatest despair or the greatest loss or sadness has been because I've loved so much. And I think when I think about it that way, it is hard to remember that in the face of despair, but when I miss something or I've felt a tremendous loss or despair, it's because I've loved with every fiber of my being, and I'm so glad I could do that, right? So it's, I think, just maybe that remembering or recasting. It's hard for sure, and I don't have an easy answer. There's no easy answer that I could possibly give you right now. When you see, I know early on in the pandemic, there was body bags after body bags, and who knows, I truly didn't know if I would see my parents again, who live in Florida. But there's also so much fear that gets pushed right now, and I'm absolutely guilty as the next person of succumbing to that, of falling into that. I think ultimately any situation where I've felt bad about, I've pushed back with love, or I've tried my best to push back with love, and that has overcome fear, that has overcome like despair, that has overcome feelings of inadequacy, or I'm failing as a writer, or failing as a mother, or failing as a wife, or any number of hats that I wear, have pushed back like I'm doing the best that I can. And I guess I would just say to be tender with yourself first and foremost, to not have, someone asked yesterday in Indianapolis, like, how do you deal with despair and kind of go to work or, just write or do anything really besides crumple in a ball? I would say I don't want to have, I guess there's never a point where I don't want to have things tugging on me, be it deadlines, be it my family, my loved ones, wanting to be outside, because that means I don't have a pulse anymore, you know what I mean? So it's that awareness of like, I get to do this, I get to be alive, I get to drive my kids to practice, I get to, all the things that are great and not so great, I get to do that. But also to take care of my neighbor. That's the other thing. It's not just what am I doing in the face of despair, but also how can I help my neighbor? Are they okay? Can I check on my neighbor? I think if everybody did that with one neighbor or one friend, that's something tangible, It's when we become too afraid of everything and just turn inward and just, I'm going to get me and mine, get the bag, or whatever those phrases are. My students try to tell me. I know they're cringing right now. What is that phrase? Get the bag? Is it called Get the Bag? Okay. My sons would also say that I'm cringe right now, trying to say these hip phrases, that kind of thing. I think the minute we do that, that's also when it's hard. When you turn to somebody else, when you realize there's other people that you can tend to, it doesn't feel so bad, I think. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's a brilliant question, and I can go, that's a whole essay right there, but I don't, the short answer is I'm admitting I don't have a set answer. What I can do is check on my neighbor and check on my heart, because without those two things, I can't be of service to anybody else, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then you had a question too, last one, yeah.
So you were talking about how kids lose their wonder, and
not all kids,
yeah. But I was thinking about it, and I remember I used to ask so many questions to the point where my mom used to get annoyed at me.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just kind of scared that I've lost my wonder. So I was just wondering if you had any advice on how I could get it back.
Yeah. Well, let me rephrase it to put your mind at ease. I think maybe I was being a little hyperbolic. I don't think we lose it, like we lost a watch somewhere under the couch or something like that. I think we all have it. We have to remember what it's like to let ourselves be astonished, to let ourselves be vulnerable and say, I don't know that. Do you know the answer to that? Let's find the answer together, that kind of thing. I love librarians for that. I love libraries. That was my second home for that. Shout out to IU libraries. There was never a question, and I had lots of questions as a kid, as you can imagine. There was never a question that the librarians, if they didn't know the answer, that they couldn't point me to the direction of that, you know? So I think it's kind of, you know, just a reiteration of like, think of what you were curious about when you were kids. Was it, did you like rocks? Did you want to know about, I don't know, Henry VIII? You know, what was that thing that you genuinely were excited to learn more about? What were your picture books like? I didn't have picture books, I want to say this. I had all science books, or we didn't really have a whole lot of books in the house. They were medical journals and stuff. But my sense of wonder, I say this, though, to mention that libraries, I'm so old school when it comes to that. Not the screen. I know Wikipedia is something, but libraries, books beget questions, beget questions, beget questions. And you know, I'm dating myself now, but I'm a child of the 70s and 80s. Now children's literature is vibrant and beautiful. At the time when my parents would drop me off in the library and put me in the kids section, it would be things like Jack and Jane went to the bakery. Jane dropped her cake. Jack needs to buy a cake. And I was like, these Jack and Jane are morons, you know? Like, I didn't want anything to do with this. So I would go to the place where I had wonder, which was the science section, the grown-up science section. And I'm still basically that girl on the floor of a library with 5 books at my feet at any given time. So, and I know you were too. So find what were those subjects and just start there. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be like writing about it either, but just remember what it's like to be constantly learning about the stuff you want to know about. Yeah. But it's there. I know it's there. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Well-deserved long round of applause. I love that. Thank you so much, Aimee and Ross, and thanks to all of you for your wonderful questions. Just a few notes before you head out tonight. We so appreciate you being here. We want to again thank our hosts at the IU Arts and Humanities Council and our friends at Morgenstern's who are selling books. Woo! So if you didn't already pick up books, copies of Aimee and Ross's books are available, and there will be a book signing right next to the Morgenstern's table. So logistics for the signing, I want to give Aimee and Ross a minute just to, you know, relax. So if you want to start signing up, my friend Sam is standing there. Wave, Sam. We're just going to start lining up around the room this way, so around the front of the room. And then, or just the Morgenstern's table is the starting point. So yeah, we're gonna start lining up around the room that way, and then we'll get the signing started shortly. So I think that's it. If you're looking to dig deeper into tonight's topics, you can visit indianahumanities.org. We're doing all sorts of environmental humanities programming, so if you like tonight's conversation, check us out. Thanks again, Aimee and Ross.